Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhiraye. Today we'll be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, text number 10. Who's speaking? Are you sure? Then say it. Correct. Kamasya nendriya pritir Labo jiveta yavata Jivasya tattva jignasa Narato yash cheha karmapi Kamasya of desires. Na, not. Indriya, senses. Prīti, satisfaction. Labha, gain. Jiveta, self-preservation. Yavata, so much so. Jivasya, of the living being. Tattva, the absolute truth. Jignasa, inquiries. Na, not. Artaha, end. Ya, cha iva, cha iha, whatsoever else. Karma bhi, by occupational activities. We'll say together, life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The completely bewildered material civilization is wrongly directed towards the fulfillment of desires and sense gratification. In such civilization, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. In politics, social service, altruism, philanthropy, and ultimately in religion, or even in salvation, the very same tint of sense gratification is ever increasingly predominant. In the political field, the leaders of men fight with one another to fulfill their personal sense gratification. The voters adore the so-called leaders only when they promise sense gratification. As soon as the voters are dissatisfied in their own sense satisfaction, they dethrone the leaders. The leaders must always disappoint the voters by not satisfying their senses. The same is applicable in all other fields. No one is serious about the problems of life. Even those who are on the path of salvation desire to become one with the absolute truth and desire to commit spiritual suicide for sense gratification. But the Bhagavatam says that one should not live for sense gratification. One should satisfy the senses only in so much as required for self-preservation, and not for sense gratification, because the body is made of senses, which also require a certain amount of satisfaction. There are regulative directions for satisfaction of such senses, but the senses are not meant for unrestricted enjoyment. For example, marriage or the combination of a man with a woman is necessary for progeny, but it is not meant for sense enjoyment. In the absence of voluntary restraint, there is propaganda for family planning, but foolish men do not know that family planning is automatically executed as soon as there is search after the absolute truth. Seekers of the absolute truth are never allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification, because the serious students seeking the absolute truth are always overwhelmed by the work of researching the truth. In every sphere of life, therefore, the ultimate end must be seeking after the absolute truth, and that sort of engagement will make one happy. because he will be less engaged in varieties of sense gratification. And what that absolute truth is explained as follows. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Nitai Namine Che Namirhate Sharamudena Dite Chere Nitai Namine Che Namirhate Sharamudena Dite Chere Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We were able, many of us, to go to the Mangalartik today. Shri Radha Madan Mohan. Jayatam Surato Pangor, Mama Manna Matirgati, Matsarvaswa Padambo Jau Radha Madan Mohan. The essence of our practice of Krishna consciousness is to come to the personality of Godhead, Kṛṣṇa, in his various forms, and worship him. That way, our senses naturally feel satisfied. And especially Shri Radha Madan Mohan, this Madan, the way in which we live in the material world, we're naturally subjected to the attractions of the senses because we have a material body. And a material body means senses. And when we come into the world, the senses are embedded in their objects. You don't have to try for it. It just happens automatically. Fish have this attraction to the senses. They see a worm or a little fly, and they don't have to go to school to learn how to do it. No certificate necessary for the fish. They automatically go after the worm, and they see the form of a mosquito on the surface of the water, and they're able to, from the depths, recognize that that's food, and they come up and their senses grab it because the senses are embedded in their objects. They all come from the same primordial source to the senses and the sense objects, and they're intermingled or eternally connected. Therefore, it stands to reason that when we come into the world, we're naturally attracted. Thank you. To the sense objects. And Sūta Gosvāmī here is recognizing that and teaching us how to manage the senses while we're in this world. But it's not simply a process of managing the senses, but it's purifying them by approaching Kṛṣṇa. Because although the material senses are inextricably drawn to their objects here in this world, we, as part and parcel of Kṛṣṇa, Mamayavamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, are naturally attracted to Kṛṣṇa. When we see the form of Kṛṣṇa, there's a natural connection as a servitor eternally to Kṛṣṇa. There's a competition that takes place when the soul is embedded in the body and misidentifies itself with the material body, and the experience of being attracted is the same. But Srila Kaviraj Goswami in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita describes there's a difference in quality of the kind of sense desire we have when we're attracted to the objects of this world, and when our senses become purified, sarvapati vinirmuktam paratlina nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchate, and they're attracted to Krishna. And he compares it to two kinds of metal. Metal is metal, right? Yes. Say yes. Yes. But there are different qualities of metal. There's iron and there's gold. So iron is a very base kind of metal, whereas gold is considered the topmost of all metals. And desire for the senses in this world is compared to iron. Whereas when we're able to purify our desires so that we are attracted, our senses are attracted, our heart, soul, mind, everything's attracted to Krishna, that quality of desire is gold. And in the Sri Upanishad, as anybody who's ever sat around and listened to my talks has heard me quote more than practically any verse in the history of verses I've ever quoted, Anyare Bahur Sambhavad, Anyara Ahura Sambhavad, Iti Shushramadiranam, Enastad Shakshre, which means that smart people have already worked it out for us ahead of time. And that is that there's a completely different result from applying one's senses to Krishna and its opposite, which is applying one's senses to the material world in the way of being attracted and trying to embrace the experience of enjoying the material world, which Krishna also very helpfully in the Bhagavad Gita tells us, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkayonai evate, adyantavantakonteya nate shuramate buddha. He says this, smart people have figured out for us already that when you give into the default mode of attracting or allowing your senses to interact with the material objects, you'll be disappointed. What's more, the result that you were hoping for won't be there. In fact, you get the opposite result, which is a bundle of misery. Whereas, if you're able to train your senses in the process of devotional service, which means to regulate the senses not in a militant way, but in a way in which is natural because we like to see things, we like to hear things, we like to taste things, and in devotional service, we can apply our mind and senses to Madan Mohan. Madan Mohan, 18 Thakur Goriyaki, Karyachina Atmasat, 18 Ericharan Hamdontini Moranat, is the first in the three deities that are worshipped by all Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and the entryway into devotional service. Because Madan Mohan, as the all-attractive Supreme Personality of Godhead, can satisfy our senses. So if we see Madan Mohan, and then we taste the prasadam offered to Madan Mohan, we hear about Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, and in that way utilize our senses. Naturally, the senses will become attached to Madan Mohan. And then we can apply the practical advice of this verse, which is kamasya nendriya prītir. We shouldn't have love for the objects of the senses. If you've ever had love for any of the objects of the senses in this world, well, have you? Yes. Like, I love that. I love you, and so on. There are myriad ways in which you can try to apply the love that you have naturally in your heart as a living being to the objects of this world. You can write poetry to your beloved, and you can also love your city. People sing songs about it, about their hometown. You probably know one that comes to your mind. You can love your country. We went to a graduation ceremony, and there was a song about California and how beloved it is of those who are alum of that particular university. It just happens to be in California, whereas it looked like most of them were actually from Asia. The same principle that goes on in the material world. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, yada, yada, yada. But when we follow the process of bhakti, which is to sing to Madan Mohan, the transcendental songs, and then to hear about the pastimes of the Lord, and that loving propensity is no longer in love with the material sense objects. Kamasya nendriya prīti labo jivete yavata. Then, by the power of higher taste, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasiddhina rasavarjam rasopyasyat param drishvanavartate. We'll find the spiritual strength to make wise decisions, even though throughout our lives, until we come to a tipping point, which is called ruchi. We'll naturally have this nagging sense of, well, can I have it, can I have it, can I have it here in the material world? But we'll develop a sense of intelligence called vivek, to make a discrimination. Anyarevahor sambhavat, anyarahora sambhavat. No, I want the superior thing. And at intervals, we'll also get a sense that I actually like the better thing. I like Madan Mohan, I'm attracted. And then we'll follow the advice of this verse. Kamasya nendriya pritira. Sūta Gosvāmī says that our desires that we naturally have as being living entities, he's saying in the negative, it should never be applied merely for sense gratification in the material world. But does that mean then that we become antisocial and we get rid of all our stuff and we don't interact with the world at all? No, it doesn't. Jivasya tattva jignasa means maintain yourself. Jivasya means you can go to Whole Foods, go to the organics aisle even. You buy an avocado, it costs $2 more. Because jivasya, maintain yourself. You can invest in taking care of your body, making sure that your regulated senses, you get enough exercise. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, yukta hara viharasya, yukta chesasya karmasu, yukta swapna babodasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. Be regulated in your sleep. Be regulated in the way that you reinvent yourself and recreate yourself. And don't eat too much, don't eat too little. And you do all that with an awareness that I need these senses, but not for sense gratification. For jignasa, which means to have vitality, so that I can inquire for my highest good. Ahamevāsameva agre nanyat yat sarasat param tasmaraham taritascha yovashishye tasosmyaham. There's a way in which Sukadeva Goswami describes in the Chatur Shloki Bhagavatam that one should directly and indirectly inquire about the absolute truth. So one's entire life, with one's acquired vitality by taking care of oneself, can be fully utilized in the service of Krishna. So we have very practical advice from Sūta Gosvāmī, and that is, make sure that you're healthy and that you're in a natural condition of life so that you can have vitality, and then with whatever strength you have, with whatever wherewithal you've developed by good association, by getting a human body, by having some intelligence, by Krishna's mercy, use that to ask, how can I increase my service to Madan Mohan? And one will, step by step, come to the coveted position of being actually attracted to Krishna. Not theoretically, not because everybody else is doing it, but actually because I've awakened the natural prīti, or love, that I have. And now I've transferred that from love of the material world, and my main priority, even if I can't do it perfectly, my main priority becomes, I want to worship Madan Mohan. And Krishna is there very specifically to save us from ourselves in this material world. That's why he comes and he stands and holds forth for everyone to come and see him. And he doesn't mind if you stand there all day long and stare at him. In fact, he likes it because he realizes that here's my devotee. And rather than staring at something else, which will happen naturally if you pick up your phone, you sit there with drool coming down your cheeks until you nod off, looking at all the different forms that go by the screen, which are designed specifically to attract and invoke the lowest of impulses that we have for this world, and think, maybe I could have a stake in the world too. No, you can't. There's not a place where you can stake a claim here that you can keep. It's not yours. But you can stake a claim in the spiritual world because it's real, and you can have a relationship that will actually fulfill your desire for love, your desire for beauty, your desire for a responsive relationship with someone who actually cares about you more than anybody else can care in this material world. Om Tat Sat. Now we'll take some reflections or questions. Yes, Shrikar, welcome. Coming off his tour from his hit song. It's burning up the internet. Hare Krishna. Is that extra microphone getting passed around? Do we need it? It's on there. I mean, mic, I mean. If you keep this mic with you, it goes with our new setup, then those online don't just get the ambient sound that comes through this microphone, but it goes directly. And it's a much better quality. So remember that you're on stage here. This is the live studio audience. The bigger audience is online. So speak in the mic and make it good. No pressure. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have two questions. First question. So in Sripad Ayanda Prabhu's, one of his lectures, I heard he was talking about how it's so much easier to develop love for Godhead if you don't get married. If you stay in the brahmacharya ashram, go directly, on that path. But we have the desire to sense gratify, so at least then we decide, okay, maybe we should get married. But we still need to control our senses in married life. So it's like our motivation for getting married may be to enjoy with like whoever, but then you still need to control your senses, and the point of Grihastha ashram is to, serve together, have good Krishna conscious children. So it feels a little conflicting, and I'm just
ask a question in one sentence with a question mark at the end, no semicolons.
How does one control their senses in the Grihastha ashram?
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Good question. Thanks for coming right to the point to start off our yatra. My experience, I was a brahmachari for 13 years and very happily engaged in brahmachari life. I've now been a grihastha for 38 years. And very happily so. And I've found lessons in both those ashrams to be profound. And that's because each situation we go into in life, when we're not fooling around, and there's a song, I'm trying to remember the name of the artist, but the lyric, the refrain of the song is, I fooled around and fell in love. So varnashram means no fooling around, in the sense of you're under authority. You do things for Krishna, as I said earlier, even if you don't do them perfectly, you're doing them to the best of your ability, with what you have right now, who you are right now, what stage of life you're in right now, and you take permission from Krishna through authorities to enter into whatever stage of life you need to be in. And that includes brahmachari life, that includes grihastha ashram, that includes vanaprastha, and it includes complete renunciation. All these are acknowledgments by Krishna that at particular phases in our life, and everyone's different, it's unique, it's not stereotyped, we need a way to live our life, jivasya tapajignasya. Jivasya means you should have vitality. Some people, and I felt it, Hare Krishna, myself, brahmachari ashram, I felt great vitality, because it was this specific time in my life when I needed to have that full permission just to be engaged in service all day long. My psychophysiological nature changed, and that happens. And I decided to enter into Grihastha ashram when I was 29. I did so under permission and with care. I didn't fool around and fall in love. No fooling around. And because of that, in the Grihastha ashram, I have not felt any impediment. Rather, on the contrary, I've found that I had a kind of shelter and authorized permission to live in a way that I've needed to over the last few decades, to be balanced, jivasya tattva-jignasa, so that I can inquire, and that is inquiry about the absolute truth. If you're suited for a particular ashram and you try to go for another ashram out of a sense of, I'm going to beat the system, good luck. And Krishna doesn't even recommend it. In the Bhagavatam, he says to Uddhava, Sve Sve Adhikaryanishta Saguna Parikirtita, that you should act according to what you need, according to what you are and what makes you balanced in life, so that you can go in inquiring. Adhikari, what's your adhikari at a particular time? And he says, Saguna Parikirtita. He says, good for you for doing that. That's what he's saying, actually, to Uddhava. Viparya tu dosha son, he said, and the opposite is a fault. If you think that I'll artificially try to live in a way to show that I'm more spiritually advanced than I actually am, and he says, that's a dosha. Not a dosa. It's a fault. It means you're not going to succeed in trying to be something you're not. Prabhupada, in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the section of Gajendra, describes how Gajendra was an elephant and he was a land animal, very powerful land animal. And the crocodile was a water animal. And when Gajendra got out of his element and was in the water and was attacked by a crocodile, which he could have easily beaten on the land, couldn't beat him in the water, and he almost died. And Prabhupada then uses that to describe how each one of us has to be in a natural condition of life for us to go on with vitality and inquire about the absolute truth. So any glorification of any ashram means it's a glorification and appreciation by the person who's in that ashram, who's suited to be in that ashram. And it's true. You can make the same statements about the Grihastha ashram, which Prabhupada does. He says, first of all, that most of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's intimate associates, Nitya Siddhas, were Grihasthas. You don't find that in Shankaracharya's system. Unless you've taken sannyas and given up the world, then you are not qualified to be, you have no standing in spiritual life. But because bhakti is so complete, and it includes what I said before, a way of interacting with the world in which you're never affected by it because you're doing everything for Krishna, including raising children, we wouldn't have this yatra at all. If everyone just took to the sannyas ashram, or maybe there'd be, anyway. So there's no harm. What's your second question?
I'll try to make this as concise as possible. What is the significance or reason behind the Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana deities? Or like why is, from what I remember, Madan Mohan, Govinda and Gopinath being Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojana?
Yeah.
But why are those deities related to those aspects?
Madan Mohan means that Krishna helps us to transfer from material lust to prema. Means to transfer away. And he's named in that way, Madan Mohan, for a reason. That Madan in the material world is Cupid, who affects everyone. He shoots his arrow and then, oh, I'm in love. And that leads to a long string of consequences, or that's redundant, because consequences means a string of results. But there are consequences for that in which one becomes more entangled in the material world. Gopinath, jumping to the prayojan, is the highest conception of that love, in which Gopinath, he's the Lord of the gopis. That's the context of the highest form of life, or highest consciousness, which is invoked by the process of bhakti, especially here in Srimad Bhagavatam, when we hear that Bhaktim param bhagavate pratilabhya kamam hridrogam ashvapahino yacharena dhira. Sūta Gosvāmī says that when one is able to appreciate Gopinath, that is the activities of Krishna with the gopis in Vrindavan, then it also says there, hridrogam ashvapahino acharena dhira, very quickly, that one loses the desire for the material world and one to see anything else. All other things seem, the desires seem abhorrent to him, but it's the context of him with the gopis. And then the Abhideya, the Govinda. Govinda means that we have senses. Go means senses, it also means cow. And Govinda engages our senses. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam taprat nirmalam. There's a way in which Govinda, he's also the Lord of our senses. So when we engage in devotional service, we're practically using our senses. And that Krishna is there for us at that level also, every stage of life. Madan, attracting us away from the material world. Gopal, engaging our senses. Gopinath, treating us to a glimpse into the highest level of love in the spiritual world. 18 Thakur Goriyaki Kariyachana Atmasat. 18 Chanan Vandam. Tiner Moranat. These are the lords of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So we have a very clear path, and it's relishable at every step. Another question. Yes? Yes, you may.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. I just wanted to say something about my experience with marrying someone who was a brahmachari for 13 years. I didn't live in the Brahmacharini ashram, but I lived at a temple for 13 years, so that meant I was able to do the morning program, the full morning program, have service. I worked for BBT, evening program like that, so it was similar to Prabhu. But if you have the chance and you have the desire, I highly recommend at least a year in an ashram where you get that experience of living the monastic life. It has given us such strength in our Krishna consciousness and in our relationship because we were trained so nicely in everything that Srila Prabhupada brought to us. And so I know that because Prabhu had that experience of being a brahmachari and dedicating 24 hours a day enthusiastically, there's a dependence I have on him for that. And I've also been trained in my deity worship and so many other things that it's given us a really good foundation, not just in our Krishna consciousness, but in our relationships as well. So, as I said, if you can take that time to, after your educations or in the summers or whenever, to get that ashram experience, and I know some of you are doing that even as you're in college, it's so beneficial that unless you do it, you really can't experience the gravity and the blessings of that experience.
Thanks, Kula. That's a good point. And the yatras are a little bit like that. Oftentimes, there's not a lot of ashrams to move into. But having yatra time, isn't it something like that? You wake up to Mangalarti, you're there engaged 24/7, you get a taste, even a small taste. We notice people who come from other backgrounds or even aware of Krishna consciousness who get a chance for even 3 days to go somewhere, wake up in the morning, have sunrise meditation, chanting japa, and being together hearing about Krishna in appropriate ways for their level, they get transformed. And it's transformation that we're looking for in this human form of life. You don't want to rot on the vine and just waste the opportunity that you have. So getting that experience, it works, and it gives you the wherewithal to utilize whatever ashram you go into to the fullest extent. Because you can be in the wrong place, and as I give an example, some people say, well, shouldn't I live at Radhakund? It says that in the Upadeshamrita. First of all, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said we don't live at Radhakund, we live down the road. And we keep the conception of Radha Gopinath above our heads. And we worship that conception as we go on preaching in the material world and consider ourselves humble servants of the servants of the servant. But I've known people who have moved to Vrindavan and then they developed the consciousness that they want to watch a movie. So then they drive to Delhi to watch a movie. And then you come back to Vrindavan. What's better, living in Delhi and wishing you were in Vrindavan, or being in Vrindavan and wishing you were in Delhi watching a movie? So it's a real process. It's not something artificial where you just move somewhere or you put on something. We're not into putting stuff on or putting others on. We want to be real. And we actually want to experience a transformation of consciousness. We are spiritual beings. We are part and parcel of Krishna. This is not just theoretical. And if we apply ourselves appropriately at the right times, in the right association, we'll have a transformation. And it's a long life if you're lucky to live long. And if you apply yourself to the different eras of your life, then you'll have that asset that nobody else has in this material world. And you can't do it all of a sudden at the end. You have to be methodical throughout your lifetime to the best of your ability. We have time for one more question. So it better be good. Yes?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Can you hear?
Can hear.
So Prabhuji, always it's a struggle for me, like to remember Krishna all the time. It's especially when you are in work meetings or you're in the business world, right? We try to remember Krishna when we are traveling, chanting all the time or flying or anywhere. But especially when you are focused on work completely, and you tend to forget sometimes. Like sometimes I remember, yes, Krishna helped me in making the decision, but most of the time I forget. So how to deal that? Like how to remember Krishna all the time?
Well, first of all, Krishna mentions that in the Gita, probably specifically comments on it in the 8th chapter in that verse, Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu Mamanusmara Yudhyacha Mayarpita Mano Buddhir Mami Vaiśeṣika Samshayaha, where he says, therefore, because it's such an important development to be able to remember Krishna, and especially at time of death. Prayana Kali Manasachalina, you have to have this spiritual strength to be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. It's the whole purpose. He says, therefore, Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu, you should always remember me in all circumstances. And he says, you should remember me and fight. And Prabhupada gives a very practical purport where he says, this is good for those who are working in the world and who are asking this very question. How do I remember Krishna as I'm working? And Prabhupada says, chant Hare Krishna. And that means, at least if you're engaged in good japa, then you'll have the opportunity to be in your work even when you have to be fully absorbed and present for doing your work. And at the very least, even if you're not specifically thinking of Krishna while you're working, which is also possible, as you can see Krishna in everything. You might see the person who's running the meeting is so expert, and you think, oh, that's coming from Krishna because he's the intelligence of that person. Or there might be some anomaly involved, and you'll think, oh, that's due to the effect of the modes of nature. You can be filtering it just like, remember the Terminator? Or didn't he have some glasses or something? You don't know who the Terminator is. He was a robot, I think, from a different time era. But nowadays, even there are glasses from, who makes them now? Google or something? Huh? Meta, yeah, Meta. You have some? You're not wearing glasses, I'm checking you out. Glasses, and you look through them and it gives you a digital reading. This is this, that is that. When you chant good japa, and as Krishna says, Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janaya Yashuvayara Jnanam Chaya Haitukam, says, you chant, I'll throw in for free. Tell you what to do for you, little jiva. I'll throw in for free knowledge and detachment. And you get these spiritual glasses, and you're looking through, you're in the meeting, somebody says something, and then there's a readout that comes across your meta glasses and says, oh, that was the mode of passion, tishma, ignorance, what that person just said. And you think of Bhagavad Gita as you're engaging. And then after, when you're driving home and you're listening to a lecture and you're reflecting on your day, you'll process everything through that contrast that you see between spiritual material. Anyadevahur sambhavad, anyadahur sambhavad. And you'll think, oh, those people want something nice, but they're licking the outside of the bottle. They're not actually getting it. Just went to a program at Salesforce before we came here, and I was talking to an executive there afterwards, and he really wanted to taste something. And he was talking about the ways that he was trying to do good for the world, which is nice. He tried to give money during the pandemic to get oxygen tanks. But there's not a conception of Madan Mohan. And you can see that big corporation, it's the biggest building in San Francisco, And there's some tinge of spiritual idea. There's monks' pictures on the wall and things like that in that corporation, because the founder has that some spiritual bent, but they're not getting it. And you'll think of that. You'll remember this, the benefit of Madan Mohan. And final point, it goes with your question about this ashram, that ashram. Main point, when we're cultivating Krishna consciousness, especially chanting, to the point where we actually like it. We like it that we don't want to stop chanting and we're looking forward to chanting. We're developing some taste. Or another level, we know with our intelligence, this is the right thing to do. That's a very elevated position, even before I have taste. Don't try for taste. Just chant, be dutiful. Let Krishna give you something if he feels like it, and just think, I don't deserve anything. But if you get that, then you'll see you've got everything. Even if you have one molecule of sense of duty to chanting Hare Krishna, you'll look at the whole corporate world and everything in the whole material world as being insignificant. As is in that poem, the Kevala Namashtakam, the person saying from his perspective, I see even Brahma, Indra, everything, they're lower than, what's that difference between them and an ant? It's all in the material world because the holy name is so exalted. So Prabhupada's solution is, as usual, chant Hare Krishna. And if we attend to that, then everything else will work itself out. And if you feel like you got a lot of problems, chant. If you feel like you don't fit in somewhere, that's where you come in. Let me take a few more. If you feel like you don't have enough of something, chant. If you feel like you have more problems than anybody else in the world, chant. If you don't like the way your hair looks, chant. And if you're happy, chant. Thanks, Shirkula. See, we complement one another. Yin and yang. This is a beautiful verse. This is given to us by Sūta Gosvāmī. It's very simple, but it's very practical. And we have a highly effective process through which we can rise above the base connection we have with the material world and purify it and come to the position of Vaishnavas, of actually loving Krishna and wanting to be with him. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, if you so desire, please give us the intelligence to chant Hare Krishna and to go on chanting when we're happy or sad, whether we're appreciated or we're not getting enough respect. Please let us have the intelligence to go on chanting your holy names. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Now we have...